The pen felt lighter than I expected for something that heavy. I had just signed the last page of the purchase agreement, and the salesman, a young kid, maybe 30, with a firm handshake and an honest smile, slid the keys across the desk like he was handing me something fragile. Maybe he understood, maybe he didn't. Either way, I drove that RV off the lot on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, windows down, the radio playing something old that I couldn't quite name but knew all the words to. I was 64 years old. I had spent 41 of those years working maintenance for the county. Early mornings, cold winters, a back that knew every story. My wife, Lorene, passed 3 years before. Cancer. The quiet kind that doesn't announce itself until it's already won. After she was gone, the house felt like a museum. Every room a display of a life we'd built together that I was now supposed to walk through alone. So I sold the house. People acted like I'd lost my mind. My daughter, Brenda, called me twice that week to ask if I was okay. My son-in-law, Curtis, called once, not to ask how I was, but to ask if I'd spoken to a financial advisor. I hadn't. I didn't need to. Lorene and I had been careful people. We'd saved carefully, lived below our means, never carried credit card debt past the end of a billing cycle. When I sold the house, I walked away with more money than either of my kids had probably ever seen in a single number. I bought the RV outright. A Tiffin Allegro, 34 feet, used but well kept. The previous owner had been a retired schoolteacher from Minnesota who'd put careful miles on it. National parks, mostly, she said. She'd kept a little journal in the glove compartment, logging every campsite. I found it after I got home. I read the whole thing that night. By the end, I was crying, though I couldn't have told you exactly why. I put my own notebook in that same compartment. Blank. Ready. I had plans. The Blue Ridge Parkway in October. The Gulf Coast for winter. Maybe up through New Mexico in the spring. Out to see the Painted Desert. I hadn't traveled much during my working years. Lorene and I had always said someday. I understood now that someday wasn't a destination. It was a decision. I parked the RV in my daughter's driveway the night before I planned to leave. She lived 40 minutes from where the house had been, in a suburb with good schools and a homeowners association that had opinions about lawn edging. I'd told her I'd stop by, say goodbye properly, let her see the rig before I headed out. She'd made pot roast. We ate at the kitchen table, the three of us, Brenda, Curtis, and me, and for a while it felt almost normal. Curtis asked how much I'd paid for the RV. I told him. He set his fork down. Dad, Brenda said. She called me Dad, even though I was her father-in-law by marriage, her own father having left when she was 11. That's a lot of money. It's a good vehicle, I said. Curtis leaned back in his chair in that particular way he had, the way that meant he was about to explain something to you. He was in commercial insurance. He had an opinion about most things. You know what the depreciation curve looks like on something like that? First year alone. Curtis, I said. I didn't ask. He smiled. Not a warm one. After dinner, Brenda walked me out to the driveway. The RV sat there under the streetlight, and I thought it looked good, solid, real. Are you sure about this? She asked. More sure than I've been about anything in a while, I said. She hugged me, and I held on a little longer than usual. She smelled like her mother's shampoo. I don't know if she knew that or not. I went to bed early, in the RV parked right there in their driveway. I had a good mattress, a reading light, a window I could crack to let in the night air. I slept better than I had in months. I woke up to Curtis knocking on the door. It was early, maybe 7. The sun had just cleared the roofline. I pulled on my jeans and opened the door, and he was standing there in his work clothes already, coffee in one hand, his keys in the other. "Can I come in?" he said. I stepped back and let him up the stairs. He looked around the interior the way he always looked at things, like he was assessing it, pricing it in his head. He sat down at the table without being invited, set his coffee down, and folded his hands. "I've been thinking about this," he said, "and I need to be honest with you." I sat across from him. "All right, you're 64. You've had 2 knee surgeries. You've been living alone for 3 years. Driving a vehicle this size by yourself across the country, that's not responsible. I've been driving since before you were born," I said. He nodded like I'd made his point for him. "That's exactly what I mean. Reaction times change. Things happen. What if you have a medical episode on the highway? What if you get a flat tire in the middle of nowhere? Brenda worries. The kids worry. The kids are fine. They don't know what I'm doing." "They will," he said. "Look, I'm not trying to pick a fight. I'm trying to have a practical conversation. You've got real money sitting in this vehicle. Money that's where I've decided it goes," I said. "Then it goes where I've estate plan is for." He looked up at me. You've updated your estate plan? I have an appointment with my attorney next week, I said. This was true. I had scheduled it before I bought the vehicle, in fact. I wasn't new to planning ahead. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I think you should consider staying closer to home for now, at least until we can get a doctor to evaluate. Evaluate what? Your capacity, he said, to make these kinds of decisions, to live independently. I looked at him across that table for a long moment. The morning light was coming through the side window, and it caught the dust in the air. And I thought about Lorene and how she used to say that you learn the most about a person by watching how they treat someone who can't do anything for them anymore. Curtis, I said, I'd like you to leave my vehicle now. He left. But as he was climbing down the steps, he turned and said, We're just trying to help. I shut the door. I sat there for a while. I made coffee. I watched the steam rise from the mug. I had been planning to leave that morning right after breakfast, but I found I wasn't hungry anymore. I drove instead. Just pulled out of the driveway at 7:40 and didn't look back. I spent that first night in a state campground 2 hours east, pines all around, a creek somewhere below the ridge. I built a small fire and read for a while and went to sleep before 9. In the morning I woke up and the world looked like something out of a painting, and I understood for the first time in a long time that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I called Brenda from the campground. She sounded strained. She said she and Curtis had talked. She said she thought maybe I was moving too fast. She said she loved me, which was true, but she also said some things that I could tell she hadn't come to on her own. The phrasing was wrong. The timing was wrong. Curtis had been coaching. I'm fine, sweetheart, I said. I'll call you from the parkway. I kept driving. For 6 weeks I traveled. I sent Brenda photos. The mountains, the coast, a plate of shrimp at a roadside place in Georgia that was the best thing I'd eaten in years. She responded with hearts and worried emojis in roughly equal measure. Curtis didn't text. That was fine. I was in Mississippi when my attorney called. Her name was Vera Stanhope. She had been my attorney for 11 years, since I'd done estate planning after Lorene's diagnosis. She didn't leave messages. When she called, she stayed on until I picked up. I've had a contact from another attorney, she said, representing your daughter and son-in-law. They've filed a petition for guardianship. I pulled the RV into a gas station parking lot and turned off the engine. They're claiming, she continued, in her particular way that had no room for drama, that you lack the capacity to manage your financial affairs, and that your recent decisions, selling the home, purchasing the vehicle, traveling alone, constitute evidence of impaired judgment. I sat there holding the phone. Raymond, she said. My name. She rarely used it. Are you listening? I'm listening, I said. Good, because I need you to do something for me. I need you to come home. I drove back in 3 days. I didn't rush, but I didn't stop for scenery either. I camped 2 nights by habit and pulled into the lot behind Vera's office on a Friday morning. She came out to meet me in the parking lot, which she had never done before. She shook my hand and looked at the RV and said, Nice vehicle. Thank you, I said. Let's go inside. What they'd filed was technically called a petition for appointment of a guardian and conservator. Curtis's attorney, a man from a firm 2 towns over, had submitted a document alleging that my decision to liquidate my primary residence, purchase a recreational vehicle, and engage in solo interstate travel at my age and with my medical history constituted behavior inconsistent with sound judgment. They had included a letter from a doctor, not my doctor. A Dr. Curtis had apparently found, who had never examined me, who had written a letter based on a description of my behavior. I read it sitting across from Vera at her clean desk, in the quiet of her office. When I finished, I put it down. This isn't going to work, I said. No, she said. It's not. But we have to respond to it properly, and we need to move carefully. A guardianship proceeding is not dismissed overnight. How long? Several months, at minimum. There will be an independent evaluation. The court will appoint someone to assess your cognitive and physical capacity. That's actually to your benefit, because you'll pass. I know I'll pass. I know you know, she said, and she almost smiled. I stayed in the area during the proceedings. I parked the RV at a campground 40 minutes outside of town. A nice one, with good hookups and a decent Wi-Fi signal, and I waited. I met with Vera twice a week. I met with the court-appointed evaluator, a psychologist named Dr. Pratt, 3 times over 6 weeks. He tested my memory, my executive function, my ability to reason through financial decisions. He asked about my medical history. He reviewed records from my actual physician, Dr. Ames, who had been my doctor for 9 years and who submitted a letter to the court that was, according to Vera, about as unambiguous as a physician's letter could be. I was, Dr. Ames wrote, in good health for my age, with well-managed orthopedic issues that in no way impaired my cognitive function or my ability to make independent decisions about my life and finances. Brenda came to see me once during that period. She drove out to the campground alone. Curtis didn't come. She sat at the little table inside the RV and looked at her hands and didn't say much for a while. I didn't want it to go this far, she finally said. I believe you, I said. He said, it was for your protection. I know what he said. She looked up at me. She had her mother's eyes, which I could never quite look at directly anymore without it costing me something. Are you angry with me? I thought about that. Not angry, I said. Hurt. There's a difference. She nodded. We sat there a while longer. She'd brought a container of cookies, oatmeal raisin, the kind Lorene used to make. We ate some. We didn't fix anything that afternoon, but it wasn't nothing either. The hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday in early March. I drove the RV to town the night before and parked it in Vera's lot. I wore the charcoal suit I'd worn to Lorene's service, which still fit. I sat in the courtroom and watched Curtis across the aisle, in a suit that cost more than mine, with his attorney beside him and his carefully arranged expression of concern. Vera had told me to let her do the talking unless I was directly addressed. I did. She was precise and methodical. She submitted Dr. Ames's letter. She submitted the evaluation report from Dr. Pratt, which concluded unambiguously that I showed no signs of cognitive impairment and demonstrated sound judgment in financial and personal decision-making. She submitted my financial records, which showed that I had not depleted my assets. I had reorganized them. I had moved from a fixed property with maintenance costs into a liquid situation that suited my retired lifestyle. She submitted letters from 2 former colleagues, men who had worked alongside me for over 20 years, attesting to my character and clarity of mind. Then she did something I hadn't expected. She asked the judge's permission to enter one more item into evidence. The judge said yes. Vera walked to the front and held up a manila envelope. Your Honor, she said, this is a document that my client prepared and placed in his vehicle prior to the events that led to this filing. It is dated 3 weeks before his son-in-law first raised concerns about his capacity. Curtis's attorney leaned over and whispered something. Curtis's expression didn't change. The document was a letter. I had written it myself, sitting at the table in the RV on the first night I parked in Brenda's driveway, before any of this started, before Curtis knocked on my door that morning, before any conversation about capacity. I had written it because Lorene used to say that smart people plan for what they hope won't happen. I had written it to no one in particular, or maybe to everyone in particular, explaining in plain language why I had made the decisions I had made, why I sold the house, what the money was for, what my plans were, what I understood about my own health, what I wanted for the remaining years of my life, and why those years belonged to me. I had signed it, dated it, and placed it in the glove compartment with the old school teacher's campsite journal. The judge read it. The courtroom was quiet for the better part of 5 minutes. When she looked up, she did not look at me. She looked at Curtis. The petition was denied. She didn't editorialize much. Judges usually don't. But she did say, before she closed the file, that the evidence presented no basis for guardianship and that the petitioner had failed to demonstrate any impairment of judgment. She said the court would note, for the record, that the respondent had in fact demonstrated notable foresight and clarity of intention. I didn't look at Curtis as I left. I didn't need to. Vera walked me to the parking lot. It was a clear morning, cold but bright, the kind of early March day that can't quite tell if it's still winter. She shook my hand again. What will you do now? She asked. Finish the Blue Ridge Parkway, I said. I got interrupted. She nodded. Drive carefully. I always do. I drove back to the campground, changed out of the suit, and made lunch. Soup from a can, bread I'd picked up 2 days before, coffee from the little maker on the counter. I ate at the table where Curtis had sat that morning in September, in what felt like another lifetime, explaining depreciation curves to a man who had already decided where he was going. Brenda called that evening. She said she was sorry. She said it more than once, and I believed her each time. I told her I'd call her from the parkway. I told her the Blue Ridge in October was something she should see someday if she ever got the chance. Maybe I could drive up, she said. Just for a weekend. I'd like that, I said, and I meant it. I left the next morning before sunrise. I had the radio on low. something old again, and the roads were empty, the way roads are at 5 in the morning when the world hasn't started yet. The RV moved through the dark with the quiet confidence of something that knows where it's going. I opened the glove compartment at a red light outside of town. The letter was still there, where Vera had returned it after the hearing, and underneath it, the school teacher's little journal. I put my hand on it for just a moment. Then the light turned green and I drove.